talk for today is front-end apps tooling. I'm Nico. You can find me on Twitter as nsgb. I posted the slides online for you to see. I'm Bevacqua on GitHub, and I have a blog at ponyfoo.com. I'm also writing a book. It's called JavaScript Application Design. I write about processes, how to write modular applications that are testable. It comes with a lot of code samples that are fully documented that you can look at. Here's a JSConf code. If you're interested, just go to that URL and check out with it. So for today's talk, I'm going to talk about the reasons to build and the development flow. I'm going to talk about how to put together a development flow that works for you and which tools you could use. And I'm going to talk about the different kind of tasks that you can perform with those tools. Also, I'm going to talk about modularity. And in particular, I'm going to talk about how to bring modularity into the browser. So the first question I have is, why build? And more importantly, why build first rather than somewhere down the line? And the reasons for this are process, productivity, and performance. Process really means that you are able to automate, and automation really is all about reducing and eliminating repetitive work. And it also means it also helps you to reduce human error. For instance, if you go to that link, you'll find a story about the company who worked on the stock exchange, and they had one guy doing deployments on 9 different boxes, and he did it by hand on each one of those. And they also had code in production that was 10-year-old, and they didn't use it. And it was just sitting behind the flag. And they pushed some new code to 8 of those 9 instances because he just forgot one. And he forgot to deploy to that one. And the issue was that the new code was behind this old flag that they just changed to do something else. But in the 9th box, it still did the same thing. And so they started losing money because they were making bad requests. And they tried to figure out what the issue was, and they thought it was in the new code. So they started rolling that back, and they started losing more and more money. And they went bankrupt in like 30 minutes. They lost $500 million. So like I said, it reduces human error, and it eliminates repetitive work. And automation is also productivity for you, because if you are automating, you are able to do continuous development. For example, whenever a file changes, you run your tests again or your build again, so that you are able to develop without going back and forth. And you can also set that up on the cloud and do continuous integration, which is pretty much the same thing, but you do it on the cloud, and rather than do it whenever a file changes in your local system, you do it whenever someone pushes new code to your Git repo, for instance. And that also enables you to do deployments automatically if those builds pass in the cloud. And there's also performance. You get almost for free compiling, bundling, minifying, spriting, and asset hashing, which are all almost free if you are doing build first. And if you're not, you might have to move things around a little bit to figure out how exactly to bake those into what you're already doing. And all of this gives you faster response times, which means your goal of making humans happier will be easier to attain. So what tools am I going to talk about? In the old days, we just used to have tools like make, and, which were really more of general purpose kind of tools. And now we have tools that are more oriented to front-end developers, such as NPM, Grunt, Gulp, Yeoman, and a bunch of others, right, that you don't probably even know their names. So I'll just focus on NPM, Gulp, and Grunt. But really, you should choose your own tooling. And I'll just talk about these three because they're the ones that I use. But you should find the tools that fit what you need to do. So Grunt. Grunt is a configuration-driven build tool. It's easy to configure. You just write a big JSON object. Actually, it's not JSON. You just write a big object with maybe a couple of functions or options or whatever, and you configure the different tasks, which are made into plugins. And there's a whole bunch of plugins. There's like thousands of those. So you can write also your own tasks. Because it's just JavaScript. You write the function, and that's a task. The issue with Grunt is that the flow tends to get too verbose if you're trying to do something rather large in your builds, because to run a single command in your shell with Grunt, maybe it takes like 6 lines of code. And it's not so fast as the alternatives may be, but the truth is that during builds, unless you're going for continuous development, which you should do, it's not such big of a deal if the build takes a little longer. So to install Grunt, all you need to do is have a package.json file, the CLI, and the local Grunt installation. And then you have to create a Grunt file. And I'm going to show you how to do that using by creating a Grunt file that turns a few icons into sprite. So here's a Grunt file that does nothing. Module exports is the Common.js syntax for exposing an API in a module. And in Common.js, every file is a module. I'll talk about that a little more later. So here I'm loading a plugin with Grunt, and I'm initializing it with some configuration, telling it where the icons are going to be, where the sprite sheet is going to be placed, and then where I want the CSS to be placed too. And I just run Grunt sprite, and I get my icons. So it looks kind of like this. Maybe the designer gave me a bunch of icons and threw them in a directory, and I can just automate the process of creating the sprite sheet, which maybe in the old days you would just make it yourself or ask your designer to do that. It was a really painful process, right? And you can also do way more complicated stuff with Grunt. How many of you have used Amazon EC2, for instance? OK, a few. So Amazon EC2 is a hosting environment, and you can automate the deployment to that as well using Grunt. I wrote a package for Grunt called Grunt EC2, which just with your access key, your secret access key, and a few other things, it allows you to put together a build process that is able to spin up new Grunt instances. In this case, for example, I'm building the whole distribution. I'm making here. I'm making a message for the release in my changelog, and then the Grunt EC2 package will enable me to provision the Amazon EC2 instance with Nginx, Node, the works, and then it'll allow me to push to EC2 the changes that I made since the last release with rsync. And then it'll just install my dependencies again, and restart Nginx and NPM, And that's it. I'm not going to make you watch the whole thing. And then there's Gulp, which is similar to Grunt, but it's code-driven, so it's a bit linear. You're just writing code, but it still works with this plugin concept. There's hundreds because it's newer than Grunt, but it's, again, just JavaScript, so you can really build your own Gulp tasks. The issue with Gulp is that it comes with the concept of pipes, streams, and asynchronous code, which are all very Node concepts, and if you're not a Node developer, you might have an issue with that. But it's faster than Grunt, so there's that. To install Gulp, it's pretty much the same as with Grunt. You just need the package JSON, Gulp locally and globally, and that's it. And here I'll show you how to build something with Gulp. In Gulp, you create a Gulp file, and rather than expose an API, you require the API Gulp exposes. So here I'm defining a task that does nothing, and I can easily say, OK, I'll take this source file, pipe that through Uglify in memory, and then push it to the disk again. And it's really easy to add more stuff into that because it's using streams. So for instance, if I wanted to print into the console the size, I'll just add a new pipe statement and pipe that through the corresponding Gulp plugin. And I can also transform the file using a header file, for example, in my license information and the version of the package. And then I run it with Gulp build similarly to Grunt. NPM is a bit different in that it's script-driven, and there's barely any configuration. You can use any NPM package that you want. And you can write in JavaScript if you're setting the Node environment. The issue with that is that Bash isn't so cross-platform, but if you have to work with Windows, probably use something else. And it's probably the fastest option of the three I mentioned. So like I said, there's no installation for npm run. You just need the package JSON file. And then you add the scripts key. And in that object, every key is a command. So here you could do npm run lint, and you would use JSInt to lint your directory. The cool thing about npm run is that it's smart enough to figure out if JSInt is installed locally as a development dependency, for instance. It'll know to look for it in node modules, JSInt, bin, JSInt. So you don't need to install JSInt globally for npm run to work. So you do npm run lint, and that's it. But the point really is that it doesn't matter which tool you use, as long as it does the job for you and it works for you. And one last thing I wanted to talk about was modularity. For the last year and a half or so, I've been using npm, and I entered the Node community, so to speak. And I started caring so much about modules and writing code that does one thing very well, but one small thing. So how can we bring that to the browser? Well, we have Common.js, right, which is the Node module system. But we want that in the browser. And that's where Browserify comes in, which basically will convert the Common.js code into something the browser can run. So what's Common.js really? Module.js is a module system which says every file is a module. Modules have an implicit local scope, which means you don't have to use weird closures and stuff. You just declare variables, and if you want to expose something, you have to use the global.expose explicit call. They can also expose an API like we saw earlier, say module exports something. And module loading, and modules can require other modules using require like we saw earlier. And module loading is synchronous, which means the module will be pulled in as you require it. And the other difference with other module systems is that in this system, your modules are loaded in code rather than having to do like using statements and requiring other assemblies or stuff like that. So here's an example Common.js file. It declares a local variable. It exports a couple of methods in an API. And then you can require it in, set the status, and print it. In Node, you run that as Node foo, right? But that's Node. How do you bring that to the browser? That's where Browserify comes in. Browserify inlines require calls, meaning that it'll figure out what you're trying to require and bundle everything together into a single file so that the browser who can't make the requests can work with it. It ports Node core modules to the browser, so it's smart enough to work with UDL and HTTP and all of the other core modules available to Node. Non-Common.js modules can be shimmed, so you don't have to go pester the guys who are writing your favorite library just because they don't support require.js. You can use any library you want, and you just have to shim it, which means you take the global that they declare and make that into a module. And it has access to all of NPM, right? Which means you get access to a much broader community of JavaScript packages. It generates source maps, which means your development process doesn't get affected at all. And you can automate it away with a build step. So that's pretty much it. So to bundle something through Browserify, you need to use the CLI, or it has a programmatic API as well. And you can do Browserify main and output that to a browser.js file. And once you run that, there you go. You have Common.js modules in the browser. So to recap, build first rather than later. This will set a foundation for where your application looks like, and enable you to do less hackier stuff down the road. Make tools work for you rather than trying to cram your whole process into a tool that doesn't really fit your needs. And Browserify all the things, really. I believe Browserify is even better than ES6 modules. So moving forward, I definitely think this is something we should be placing more weight on. And that's all I had. Thanks.